The forest glowed with strange blue light. Minho walked carefully through the tall grass, holding his sample container in one hand and a scanner in the other. The trees here were different from anything on Earth. Their bark pulsed with soft light, like a heartbeat. He had been studying this planet for 3 months now, but it still amazed him every day. Varath 7 was beautiful. It was also one of the most dangerous places humans had ever explored. The Galactic Council had warned them many times. This world belonged to the Krell, and the Krell were killers. Every species in known space feared them. They were apex predators, built perfectly for hunting. Their scales could deflect most weapons. Their claws could tear through metal. Their intelligence made them even more terrifying. But Minho was a scientist. He believed that understanding came before fear. So he walked further than he should have, past the safety markers his team had set up. The bioluminescent moss he needed grew only in the deepest parts of the forest. Yuna had told him to wait for a security escort. He had said yes, but came alone anyway. Time was running short. Their permit to study this planet would expire in 2 weeks. The scanner beeped. Minho looked down at the reading and frowned. There was a heat signature ahead near the dry riverbed. It was large, very large. His heartbeat quickened. He should turn back. Every instinct screamed at him to run to the camp. But curiosity pulled him forward. He was a scientist after all. He moved slowly through the bushes, pushing aside glowing leaves. The riverbed came into view. It was empty now. Cracked earth stretching in both directions, and there, collapsed on the ground, was a Krell. Minho froze. His breath caught in his throat. The creature was smaller than the adults he had seen from a distance, but still massive. It had to weigh at least 80 kilograms. Its obsidian scales, which should have gleamed even in low light, looked dull and cracked. Its sides moved with shallow, desperate breaths. It was dying. The logical part of Minho's brain told him to leave. Krell were dangerous. Even young ones could kill a human easily. If an adult Krell found him near its offspring, they would both die. The Council's protocols were clear about this situation. Do not interfere with apex predator species. Observe from a distance. Never make contact. But Minho had never been good at following rules when something was suffering. He stepped forward carefully. The Krell's head moved slightly. One eye opened, revealing a golden iris that fixed on him. A low growl rumbled from its throat, but the sound was weak. The cub tried to lift its head, tried to look threatening, but it could barely move. Minho knelt down, staying just out of reach of those claws. He could see the problem now. The cub was severely dehydrated. Its scales were cracked from lack of moisture. There were scratches and cuts on its legs, as if it had been traveling for days. Perhaps it had gotten separated from its pack. Perhaps it had been abandoned. Either way, it would be dead by morning if left here. "Hey there," Minho said softly. His voice sounded too loud in the quiet forest. "You're in bad shape, aren't you?" The Krell's eye followed him as he moved closer. It made another attempt at growling, but the sound faded into something almost like a whimper. Minho had heard that sound before, from injured animals on Earth. It was the sound of a creature that knew it was in trouble. He pulled his water container from his belt and slowly extended it toward the cub. The Krell sniffed, its nostrils flaring. Then, with effort, it extended its long tongue and lapped at the water. It drank desperately, and Minho had to pull the container back to keep it from choking. "Slow down," he said. "Easy. There's more." The cub's eye stayed locked on him. There was intelligence there. Deep, ancient intelligence. The Krell were not simple animals. They had language, culture, technology. This was not a pet. This was a person, in a way. A young person who was dying alone in a forest. Minho made his decision. He tapped his communicator. "Yuna, this is Minho." The response came immediately. "Minho, where are you?" You were supposed to check in an hour ago. I'm at the eastern riverbed. I need you to prep the medical bay. There was a pause. Are you hurt? No, but I'm bringing someone who is. Someone? Minho, there's no one else out there. What are you talking about? Minho looked at the Krell cub, at those golden eyes watching him. I found a Krell juvenile. It's dying. I'm bringing it back to camp. The silence on the other end lasted so long that Minho thought the connection had dropped. Then Yuna's voice came back, higher and more strained. You're joking. Please tell me you're joking. I'm not joking. Prep the medical bay. I'll be there in about 4 hours. Minho, you can't carry a Krell back to camp. Do you know how insane that is? If its family finds you, if any adult Krell sees you with their young, you'll be killed. And what about camp protocols? What about council regulations? What about— 4 hours, Minho interrupted. I'm starting back now. He ended the transmission before Yuna could argue more. He knew she was right. This was insane. This violated every rule, every safety protocol, every piece of advice he had ever received about this planet. But when he looked at the cub, barely breathing on the cracked earth, he knew he could not walk away. Minho approached slowly. All right, friend. This is going to be uncomfortable for both of us. The Krell's eye widened as Minho slid his arms underneath its body. It made a sound, half growl and half cry, but it was too weak to resist. Minho lifted with his legs, grunting with the effort. 80 kilograms of predator settled across his shoulders. The scales were rough against his skin, even through his suit. He could feel the heat of fever radiating from the cub's body. He took his first step toward camp, then another. The weight was tremendous. His legs shook with effort. 4 hours, 15 kilometers, through hostile terrain, carrying one of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Minho adjusted his grip and kept walking. Behind him, the glowing forest seemed to watch. Ahead, the path home stretched into darkness, and on his shoulders, a predator cub's heartbeat pulsed weakly against his neck. The journey had begun. The first kilometer was the hardest. Minho's shoulders burned with pain as the Krell cub's weight pressed down on him. His legs trembled with each step. The ground beneath his feet was uneven, covered with roots and stones that seemed determined to trip him. He had to watch every footfall carefully. The cub drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes it would stir, and Minho would feel those powerful muscles tense against his grip. His heart would race, waiting for claws to dig into his chest. But each time the cub would settle again, too weak to do more than shift its weight. It's okay, Minho said, speaking more to calm himself than the creature. We're going home. Well, my home. You'll be safe there. His communicator crackled. Yuna's voice came through, tight with worry. Minho, what's your position? He checked his wrist display without stopping. 2 kilometers from the riverbed, 13 to go. Your vitals are spiking. Your heart rate is too high. You need to rest. Can't stop. If I put it down, I might not be able to lift it again. There was a sound like Yuna was biting back an argument. At least tell me the Krell is stable. Minho felt the cub's breathing against his shoulder. It was shallow but steady. For now, it needs fluids and medical care. How's the situation at camp? A longer pause this time. Jiwan is losing his mind. He's already filed 3 emergency reports to the council. He wants you arrested the moment you arrive. Minho almost laughed, but he needed his breath for walking. Jiwan was the security chief, a man who loved rules more than people. Of course he would react this way. Tell him to get in line. I'll deal with it when I get there. Minho, please be serious. This is a major violation. They could shut down the entire mission. They could send you to prison. Then they'll have to wait until I get this cub to medical care. He heard Yuna sigh, but when she spoke again, her voice was softer. You're impossible. Be careful out there. I'm tracking your position. If anything happens, I'm sending a team. No teams. Can't risk more people. Just keep the medical bay ready. The communicator went silent. Minho focused on his breathing and his steps. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Left foot, right foot. Don't think about the pain. Don't think about the distance. Just move. The forest around him grew darker. Twin moons rose in the purple sky, casting strange shadows through the glowing trees. And in those shadows, Minho saw movement. Eyes reflected the moonlight, green and unblinking. They watched from the darkness, pacing alongside him but never coming closer. Adult Krell, at least 3 of them, maybe more. Minho's blood turned to ice. This was it. This was how he died. The adults would smell their young on him and attack. He would not stand a chance, but he kept walking because stopping would not save him. If they were going to kill him, they would do it whether he stood still or kept moving. The cub stirred on his shoulders. It made a soft sound, something between a chirp and a growl. The eyes in the darkness moved closer. Minho could see shapes now, massive bodies built for killing. His hands shook, but he forced them to stay steady. Then the cub called out again, louder this time. Its head lifted from Minho's shoulder, and it made a series of clicks and low rumbles. The adult Krell stopped moving. One of them, larger than the others, stepped into a shaft of moonlight. Its scales gleamed like black glass, its eyes fixed on Minho with an intelligence that was terrifying. Minho met that gaze. He did not know what to do, so he did the only thing he could think of. He spoke, keeping his voice low and calm. I'm trying to help. Your young one is sick. I'm taking it to my camp. We have medicine. We can help. The Krell could not understand his words, but perhaps it understood his tone. Perhaps it saw that the cub was not struggling, was not crying out in fear. Perhaps it simply decided that killing Minho could wait until it knew more. Whatever the reason, the massive predator stepped back into the shadows. The eyes continued to follow him, but they kept their distance. Minho released a breath he had not realized he was holding. His legs felt like water, but he forced them to keep moving. The Krell family was tracking them. They would follow all the way to camp, but they had not attacked. That was something. Hours passed. The moons moved across the sky. Minho's world narrowed to simple things: the weight on his shoulders, the pain in his muscles, the path ahead. He fell twice. The first time, he managed to roll so the cub landed on top of him instead of hitting the ground. The second time, he was not so lucky. The cub tumbled onto the dirt and let out a cry of pain. Minho scrambled to his feet, his own pain forgotten. He knelt beside the Krell, checking for injuries. The cub's eyes opened, and for a moment Minho saw real fear there. It tried to crawl away from him, legs scraping weakly at the ground. No, it's okay, Minho said, extending his hands slowly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to drop you. Let me help. The cub watched him, breathing hard. Then, slowly, it stopped trying to escape. It laid its head back down on the ground, those golden eyes never leaving Minho's face. There was a question in that gaze. Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me? Minho wished he could explain. Because you're young and scared and hurt. Because I can't walk away from suffering. Because maybe, just maybe, kindness matters more than fear. Instead, he just offered water again. The cub drank, then allowed Minho to lift it once more. The weight seemed heavier now. Minho's shoulders were raw, his muscles screaming, but he adjusted his grip and started walking again. The forest began to thin. Through the trees ahead, Minho could see lights. The camp. He had made it. 13 kilometers through hostile territory, carrying a predator cub, tracked by its family, and he had actually made it. His communicator came to life, Yuna's voice, urgent and relieved. Minho, I see you on the sensors. You're almost here. Medical team is standing by. Jiwon has the security team assembled. This is going to be complicated. Minho looked down at the cub in his arms. Its breathing was weaker now. It had been too long without proper care. Don't care about complicated. Just save this life. He stumbled forward, each step an act of pure will. The camp gates came into view, bright lights and worried faces behind the barriers. Minho could see Yuna running toward him, medical kit in hand. He could see Jiwon's stern face, arms crossed, already composing his report. The cub made a soft sound. Minho looked down and saw those golden eyes watching him. There was something different in that gaze now. Not fear, not suspicion, something else, something that might have been trust. "We're home," Minho whispered. "You're safe now." His legs gave out. He fell to his knees at the camp entrance, still clutching the Krell cub. Hands grabbed him, voices shouted orders, but everything seemed far away. He had done it. Against all logic, against all rules, against all odds, he had carried a predator cub home. Yuna's face appeared above him. "You absolute fool," she said, but there were tears in her eyes. "You beautiful, stubborn fool." Then darkness took him, and Minho knew nothing more. Minho woke to bright lights and the smell of antiseptic. His shoulders felt like they were on fire. Every muscle in his body ached. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Stay down," Yuna's voice came from beside him. Her hand pressed gently on his chest. "You have severe muscle strain, dehydration, and 3 cracked ribs that you somehow didn't notice." "The cub," Minho croaked. His throat was dry as sand. "Is it alive?" Yuna held a water tube to his lips. "Drink first, then we'll talk." Minho drank, the cool liquid bringing relief. When he finished, he looked at Yuna with pleading eyes. She sighed and pulled up a chair beside his medical bed. "The Krell is alive, barely. It was in worse shape than we thought. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, infected wounds on its legs, and a fever that should have killed it. We've got it on IV fluids and antibiotics. Doyun has been monitoring it constantly." "Can I see it?" "Minho, please." Yuna studied his face for a long moment. Then she nodded. "It's in the isolation room, but there's something you need to know first. The cub won't eat. We've tried everything. Raw meat, protein paste, even live prey that Soman captured. It refuses all of it. It just lies there staring at the door." Minho pushed himself up, ignoring the pain. "It's waiting for me. That's what Doyun thinks. Which is impossible, by the way. Krell don't bond with other species. They barely bond with their own kind outside of family groups. But this one seems to have imprinted on you somehow." Yuna helped him into a wheelchair, and they made their way through the camp corridors. Minho could feel eyes on him from every direction. Researchers stopped their work to stare. Some looked curious, others looked angry. One junior scientist, a young woman named Soman, gave him a small smile and a thumbs up. They reached the isolation room. Through the transparent barrier, Minho could see the Krell cub lying on a padded floor. Medical equipment surrounded it, tubes running to its foreleg. Its scales looked better already, regaining some of their natural shine. But it lay completely still, those golden eyes fixed on the door. The moment Minho's wheelchair came into view, the cub's head lifted. It made a sound, a series of clicks and low rumbles that echoed in the small room. Then it tried to stand, legs shaking with effort. "Easy," Minho said, though the cub could not hear him through the barrier. He turned to Yuna. "Let me in." "Minho, that's not safe. It's still a Krell. It could hurt you." "It won't." "You can't know that." Minho met her eyes. "Yes, I can. Please, Yuna. It's scared and alone." "Let me in." Yuna muttered something under her breath about stubborn scientists, but she activated the door mechanism. The barrier slid open. Minho wheeled himself inside, and the door closed behind him. The cub watched him approach. Its body was tense, ready to move. But it did not growl or show any sign of aggression. When Minho stopped a few feet away, the Krell took a hesitant step forward, then another. Then it was there, pressing its massive head against Minho's chest, making soft sounds that vibrated through his bones. Minho raised a shaking hand and placed it on the cub's head. The scales were warm, rougher than he expected, but not unpleasant. The Krell closed its eyes and leaned into the touch. "Hey there," Minho whispered. "I'm glad you're okay." Outside the barrier, he could see Yuna watching with wide eyes. Other faces had appeared behind her. Doyun, the xenopsychology specialist, was frantically taking notes. Even Ji-won had come to watch, though his expression remained stern. Minho spent the next hour in the isolation room. He hand-fed the cub small pieces of meat, which it accepted eagerly. He checked the medical equipment with Yuna's guidance. He talked softly about nothing important, and the Krell seemed to listen, its head tilted slightly to one side. When he finally emerged, exhausted but satisfied, he found a crowd waiting. Ji-won stepped forward immediately. "We need to talk. Now. In the command center." The command center was filled with tension. Ji-won stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. Doyun sat to one side, stylus moving across his tablet. Soman was there too, along with Hyun, the communications officer, and Yuna, who positioned herself protectively near Minho's wheelchair. "This is a disaster," Ji-won began without preamble. "You violated council protocols, endangered the entire mission, and created a situation that could lead to war with a species we barely understand." Minho met his gaze calmly. "I saved a life." "You saved a Krell, an apex predator? Do you understand what that means? Their pack is out there right now, surrounding our camp. We've counted 7 adults, all within attack range. They could wipe us out." "They could have killed me in the forest," Minho said. "They didn't. They followed me here because they want to know their young one is safe." "You don't know that." "Actually," Doyun interrupted, his quiet voice cutting through the argument, "the behavioral data supports Minho's interpretation. The adult Krell have established a perimeter, but they haven't shown aggressive posturing. They're watching, waiting. If they wanted to attack, they would have done so already." Ji-won turned his glare on Doyun. "So, what do you suggest? We keep the Krell cub as a pet? This is insane." "Nobody said anything about a pet," Minho said firmly. "The cub gets healthy, then it goes back to its family. That's the plan." "And you think the adults will just accept that? You think they'll forgive us for taking their young?" Hyun cleared his throat. "Actually, there's been an interesting development. I've been monitoring the Krell communication patterns. They're talking to each other out there, using their language. And based on the vocal analysis, they're not discussing attack strategies. They're discussing us. Specifically, they're discussing Minho." Everyone turned to look at the communications officer. He pulled up a display showing sound wave patterns. "I can't translate their language, obviously, but I can analyze emotional content, stress markers, aggression indicators, and what I'm seeing is curiosity, not hostility. They're trying to understand why a human would help their young." Soman leaned forward excitedly. "This could be the breakthrough we've been hoping for. First contact with the Krell, achieved not through diplomacy but through compassion. Do you understand how significant this is?" "I understand that we're all going to prison if the council finds out," Ji-won snapped. But there was less certainty in his voice now. Minho wheeled himself closer to the table. "Here's what I think. The Krell aren't mindless killers. They're intelligent. Social creatures with families they care about. They watched me carry their cub for 13 kilometers. They saw me fall and get up and keep going. They saw me risk my life for one of theirs. Maybe, just maybe, That means something to them. Or maybe they're just waiting for the right moment to tear us apart, Ji-won said. But he sounded tired now, not angry. Doyeon set down his stylus. There's only one way to find out. We need to return the cub to its family. But we need to do it carefully, respectfully. This could be the most important first contact in human history, or it could be our last act. The difference will be in how we approach it. The room fell silent. Outside, through the command center windows, they could see the dark forest. And in that forest, 7 pairs of green eyes watched the camp, waiting for something. Waiting for a decision that would change everything. Minho looked at each person in turn. The cub will be healthy enough to travel in 3 days. When that happens, I'll take it back to its family myself. Anyone who wants to help is welcome. Anyone who doesn't can stay here where it's safe. Ji-won rubbed his face with both hands. You're going to get us all killed. Maybe, Minho admitted, but I'd rather die trying to build a bridge than live in fear behind walls. Yuna put her hand on his shoulder. Doyeon nodded slowly. Somin grinned. Even Hyun seemed convinced. Ji-won looked at them all and shook his head. Fine, but I'm coming with you. If this goes wrong, at least I can file an accurate death report. It was not quite agreement, but it was close enough. The Krell did not attack, but they did not leave either. For 3 days, the adult Krell maintained their positions around the camp perimeter. Minho named the young cub Taik, though he knew it already had a name in its own language. The cub grew stronger each day, eating well and moving with more energy. The medical equipment was removed. The infected wounds on its legs healed cleanly. But the strangest thing was Taik's behavior. The cub refused to be separated from Minho. When he returned to his own quarters to sleep, Taik would cry at the isolation room door until Yuna gave up and let it out. It would then pad through the corridors, following Minho's scent, until it found him. The first night this happened, Minho woke to find a Krell cub sleeping outside his door. His heart nearly stopped, but Taik just looked at him with those golden eyes and made a soft chirping sound, like a cat purring. Now it was normal to see Minho moving through the camp with Taik following 3 steps behind. The other researchers had gotten used to it. Some even started leaving treats for the cub, pieces of synthesized meat that Taik would accept politely before returning to Minho's side. Doyeon was fascinated. This shouldn't be possible, he said for the 100th time, watching Taik nuzzle against Minho's leg. Krell's social structure is rigid. They bond with family, sometimes with pack members, never with other species. This rewrites everything we know about them. Somin was more practical. It's beautiful, she said simply. Look at them. They trust each other. Outside, the adult Krell watched everything. Their perimeter had not moved in 3 days. They took turns sleeping, always keeping at least 4 sets of eyes on the camp. Hyun continued monitoring their communications, building a database of sounds and patterns. On the second night, something changed. Taik had been sleeping in Minho's quarters when it suddenly woke, alert and tense. It moved to the window and made a series of calls, clicks, and rumbles that carried across the night air. From the darkness, answers came. Deep, resonant sounds that made the windows vibrate. Taik called again, more urgently. The adult Krell moved closer to the camp barriers, their massive forms barely visible in the moonlight. Minho woke to Yuna pounding on his door. "Minho, the Krell are moving!" He stumbled out of bed, pulling on clothes. Taik was at the window, still calling to its family. Minho could hear the longing in those sounds. The cub wanted to go home. The camp went to full alert. Ji-won's security team manned the barriers, weapons ready but not aimed. They had strict orders not to fire unless directly attacked. Everyone understood that one wrong move could end in disaster. Minho made his way to the command center, Taik following close behind. Through the windows, he could see all 7 adult Krell now, standing in a semicircle just beyond the camp's edge. The largest one, the one Minho thought of as the pack leader, stood at the center. Its scales seemed to absorb the moonlight, making it look like a shadow given form. "What are they doing?" Jiwan asked, his voice tight with tension. Doyun studied the display showing heat signatures and movement patterns. "They're not preparing to attack. This is more like a presentation. They're showing themselves deliberately. They want us to see them." "Why?" "I think they're telling us it's time. Time to return Tyke." Minho looked down at the cub by his side. Tyke's eyes were fixed on the windows, on the shapes of its family outside. The cub made a soft sound, almost a whimper. It wanted to go to them. But it also pressed closer to Minho's leg, torn between two worlds. "Not yet," Minho said quietly. "One more day, just to be sure Tyke is fully healed." The night passed without incident. By morning, the adult Krell had returned to their positions around the perimeter. But something had shifted. The siege, if it could be called that, had entered a new phase. Both sides were waiting for the same thing now, the return of the cub. Minho spent that last day with Tyek. They walked through the camp together. Minho showed the cub the research labs, the gardens where Somin grew earth plants under alien suns, the observation deck where you could see the whole valley spread out below. Tyke seemed to absorb everything with curious eyes. It touched things carefully with its claws, sniffed at strange smells, watched the humans going about their work with intelligent attention. Somin gave it a small plant cutting as a gift. Tyke held it gently, as if understanding its value. That afternoon, Minho sat in the common area with Tyke's head resting on his lap. He stroked the cub's scales, feeling the warmth beneath. Other researchers came and went, many stopping to say goodbye to the Krell that had somehow become part of their daily lives. Yuna sat down beside them. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" "No," Minho admitted. "But it's time. The cub could stay, if it wanted to." "If you wanted it to." Minho looked at her in surprise. "You know that's not right. Tyke belongs with its family." "I know, but you've bonded with it, and it's clearly bonded with you. Letting go will be hard." Minho was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The hardest things are often the right things. Tyke isn't a pet, it's a person, a young person who has a family waiting out there in the dark. They've been patient, they've trusted us not to hurt their child. Now we have to trust them to let me approach." That night, Tyke had what Minho thought of as nightmares. The cub whimpered in its sleep, legs twitching as if running. Minho sat beside it, hand on its side, speaking softly until the dreams passed. "It's okay," he whispered. "Tomorrow you go home. Your family is waiting. Everything will be okay." But in the morning, when Minho woke, Tyke was gone. He bolted upright, heart racing. The door to his quarters was still sealed. The window was closed, but Tyke had vanished. He grabbed his communicator. "Yuna, Tyke is missing!" Her response came immediately, breathless. "I know. It's in the observation deck. Minho, you need to see this." He ran through the corridors, his injured ribs protesting every step. The observation deck was crowded with researchers, all staring out the windows. Minho pushed through to the front and stopped cold. Tyke stood at the edge of the deck, as close to the outside as it could get. And just beyond the camp barriers, all 7 adult Krell stood in clear view. The largest one, the pack leader, was making sounds. Deep, complex vocalizations that carried across the distance. And Tak was answering. The cub's calls were higher, younger, but they followed the same patterns. They were talking. Family talking to family, separated by human barriers and fear, and 3 days of waiting. Doyun appeared at Minho's shoulder, his tablet forgotten in his hand. "This is it," he breathed. This is communication, real communication between them, and they're doing it in front of us. They're showing us that they're people, not monsters. Tyke turned suddenly, looking back at Minho. Those golden eyes met his, and Minho saw something there he had not expected. Not just trust, not just affection, something like understanding. The cub moved to Minho and pressed its head against his chest one more time. Then it walked to the sealed door and looked back, waiting. Jiwan's voice came over the comm system. All personnel, this is not a drill. Minho is taking the Krell cub beyond the barriers. Security team, maintain defensive positions but do not, I repeat, do not engage unless directly threatened. Let's hope we all live through this. Minho took a deep breath. Okay, Tyke. Let's get you home. The door opened, and Human and Krell walked together toward the unknown. Dawn broke over Varath 7 in shades of purple and gold. Minho stood at the camp's outer gate, watching the sun rise over the alien forest. Behind him, the entire research team had gathered. Ahead, 7 massive Krell waited in the clearing beyond the barriers. Tyke pressed against Minho's leg, trembling slightly. The cub could see its family, could hear them calling, but it did not run forward. It stayed close to the human who had carried it through the darkness. Yuna checked Minho's suit one more time, though they both knew it would not help if things went wrong. You don't have to do this alone. We can come with you. Minho shook his head. This needs to be simple. 1 human, 1 cub. Too many of us, and they might see it as a threat. Jiwan stepped forward. Despite his earlier objections, he looked Minho in the eye with something like respect. If things go bad, we'll cover your retreat. But Minho, try not to let things go bad. That's the plan. Doyen handed him a small device. This will record everything. Audio, video, biological readings. Whatever happens out there, we'll learn from it. That's worth something. Minho clipped the device to his suit. Then he looked down at Tyke. The cub gazed up at him with those golden eyes. In the 3 days they had spent together, Minho had learned to read some of the Krell's expressions. Right now, Tyke looked scared, but also determined. Ready? Minho asked softly. Tyke made a small sound and pressed closer. Ready. The gate opened. Minho stepped through and the barrier closed behind him with a soft hiss. He was outside the camp's protection now, standing in the open with only a Krell cub for company. The distance to the adult Krell was maybe 30 meters. It felt like 30 kilometers. He started walking. Tyke walked beside him, matching his pace. The adult Krell watched their approach with unreadable eyes. Minho could see them clearly now. They were magnificent and terrifying. Each one stood at least 2 meters tall at the shoulder, their bodies built with perfect efficiency for hunting. Claws that could tear through steel, jaws that could crush bone, scales that had evolved to deflect weapons. And intelligence. That was what frightened Minho most. These were not animals acting on instinct. These were people who had watched their young one being carried away by an alien species. People who had every reason to be angry, to seek revenge. The pack leader stepped forward, separating from the group. Up close, it was even more imposing. Scars marked its scales, evidence of old battles. Its eyes, a deeper gold than Tyke's, fixed on Minho with absolute focus. Minho stopped 10 meters away. His heart hammered in his chest. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run. But he forced himself to stay still, to meet that ancient gaze. Tyke made a sound, a series of clicks and calls. The pack leader answered, its voice so deep that Minho felt it in his bones. The cub called again, more urgently. It was explaining something. Telling its side of the story. The adult Krell listened. Then, slowly, it looked at Minho. Not with aggression, not with threat, with what might have been curiosity. Minho did not know what to do. He had no script for this, no protocol. So he did the only thing that felt right. He bowed. Not a small nod, but a deep bow from the waist, the kind that showed respect in so many human cultures, a gesture that said, "I acknowledge you, I honor you, I mean no harm." When he straightened, the Krell pack leader was still watching him. Then, incredibly, it lowered its massive head, just slightly, just for a moment. But it was there. Recognition. Respect returned for respect given. Take moved forward toward its family. But it stopped halfway, looking back at Minho. The cub made a soft sound, questioning. "Is it okay? Can I go?" Minho smiled. Though his vision blurred with tears, he did not fully understand. "Go on. They're waiting for you." But Take did not go. Not yet. The cub turned and walked back to Minho, pressed its scaled head against his chest one final time. Minho wrapped his arms around that strong neck, feeling the warmth, the life, the trust. "Thank you," he whispered, "for letting me help you, for trusting me, for showing us that our peoples don't have to be enemies." Tyke pulled back and looked at him with those golden eyes. Then it did something that made Minho's heart stop. The cub raised one massive paw and gently, carefully touched it to Minho's chest, right over his heart. It held it there for 3 heartbeats. Then it turned and ran to its family. The adult Krell surrounded Tyke immediately, touching the cub with their snouts, checking it for injuries, making sounds of relief and welcome. The pack leader nuzzled its young one, then looked back at Minho. The moment stretched between them, human and Krell, 2 apex species meeting not with violence, but with understanding. The Krell could kill him now. It would be easy. But instead, the pack leader made a sound, a single clear vocalization that Hyun would later identify as carrying markers of gratitude and acknowledgement. Then the Krell family turned and walked into the forest. But Tyek looked back twice, and each time, Minho raised his hand in farewell. The cub mimicked the gesture awkwardly with one paw, then disappeared into the trees with its family. Minho stood alone in the clearing, tears streaming down his face. Behind him, he could hear cheering from the camp. The researchers were celebrating, shouting, laughing with relief and joy. But Minho just stood there, watching the place where Taek had vanished. Yuna was the first to reach him, running through the gate that Jiwon had opened. She grabbed him in a fierce hug. "You did it! You absolute madman, you did it!" Others followed. Doyun was already reviewing the recording, muttering about paradigm shifts and revolutionary data. Somin was crying happy tears. Even Jiwon allowed himself a small smile. But the real changes came in the days and weeks that followed. The Krell in the region changed their behavior toward the human camp. They no longer approached with threat displays. Hunting parties would pass near the camp's perimeter and make vocalizations that Hyun identified as greetings. Once, when a massive storm threatened the camp, a group of Krell appeared and guided the humans to a cave system they could use for shelter. Tyke was seen occasionally, always from a distance, always with its family, but sometimes it would stand on a ridge overlooking the camp, and Minho swore the cub was watching for him. The Galactic Council, of course, had to be informed. Minho was called to answer for his actions, to explain why he had violated every protocol. He expected punishment. Prison, maybe. Exile from the exploration service. Instead, he found himself in front of the entire council, with Doyun's research data playing on massive screens. Data showing peaceful Krell behavior, data showing communication patterns, data showing that contact could be made, that understanding could be built. The council head, a being from a species that communicated through color changes, addressed him directly. "You took an enormous risk. You could have started a war. You could have gotten your entire team killed." "Yes," Minho agreed. "I could have. But I didn't. Because I chose to see Tyke as a person in need, not as a threat to be avoided. You violated protocols that have kept species safe for centuries." Those protocols were built on fear. Maybe it's time we tried building something on compassion instead. The council chambers were silent. Then the head spoke again. Your actions have opened a door that we thought was sealed forever. The Krell are willing to talk. For the first time in recorded history, they want to communicate with other species, all because you carried one of their young home. Minho was not punished. Instead, he was assigned to lead the first official diplomatic mission to the Krell. The mission would be dangerous, uncertain, and could still end in disaster, but it was a chance, a real chance for peace. 6 months later, Minho stood in a Krell village, surrounded by beings that the galaxy had feared for thousands of years. And at his side, grown larger but still recognizable, was Tyke. The young Krell had insisted on being part of the diplomatic process, and its family had agreed. Through translators and patience and time, humans and Krell were learning to talk, learning to understand, learning that even apex predators could choose peace over violence. At night, Minho would sometimes sit with Take and look up at the stars, the same stars that shone over Earth, over 100 human worlds, over 1,000 alien species that made up the galactic community. And he would think about a simple choice made in a dark forest, the choice to help instead of fear, to carry instead of run. Tyke would press close to him, and Minho would rest his hand on those familiar scales. No words needed, no translation required, just two beings who had found each other in the darkness and changed the galaxy forever. Because sometimes the greatest strength is not in weapons or walls or fear. Sometimes the greatest strength is in the courage to show compassion, to bear the weight of another's suffering, to carry hope all the way home. That is humanity's gift to the stars, not dominance, not technology, but the stubborn, beautiful refusal to abandon those in need, no matter how terrifying they might seem. That is what makes humanity special. That is why the galaxy would never be quite the same. One human. One Krell cub. One choice that changed everything. And it all began with a predator who collapsed from exhaustion and the human who carried it home.